Well, the Sunday start was no Sunday stroll here on day one. Some absolute beauties, and we saw a real thriller in the match between Andrey Rublev and Thiago Seyboth Wild. I'm joined on the couch to analyse this match and to preview one for tomorrow by commentator Candy Reid. Welcome, Candy.
Thank you very much, John. Lovely to be here.
And our analyst is back for another season, Simon Ray. Welcome, Razor.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me back.
Now, this match today between Rublev and Seyboth Wild was a wild ride. Candy, just talk us through the general shape of this five-setter.
It was a bonkers shape, wasn't it? Because it appeared that Andrey Rublev would win it quite straightforwardly. He's the fifth seed here at the Australian Open, and he has already got a title this year. But I think the Brazilian didn't see the same way. He's already had a win over Daniil Medvedev at last year's Roland Garros in the first round, beat Medvedev on the clay courts, and back he came, and he made this into a real hustle and a struggle. And Andrey Rublev looked a little bit worried at many occasions. Rublev in the end had 4 set points in the regular fifth set, then one more in the tiebreaker, which he was actually losing. It could have gone either way because Seyboth Wild looked so relaxed, didn't he? He's got this very relaxed demeanour, while Andrey Rublev threatened on multiple occasions to boil over as he does. But it was the fifth seed coming through. So no upset, although that would have been a huge one on day one.
It would have been an absolute upset. Simon, talk us through some of the talking points from an analytical perspective. We saw Rublev drop those first 3 games of the match, but then he sort of found an even keel and won the second set of 2 sets to love lead. And then came some fantastic tennis from the Brazilian.
Yeah, well, I think it was probably going according to plan through the first couple of sets, aside from those early blips that you described from the perspective of the fifth seed. And Rublev, a lot of folks believing that he's absolutely capable of going deep in this draw. But certainly sets 3 and 4 didn't go to script from his perspective. And I think from reviewing the data out of the match, a large part of that was down to what the Brazilian did on his second serve. And he wasn't really getting it done early in the match in terms of on his own serve. So set 1, he averages 165 kilometres an hour on his second serve, only wins 38% of those points. Set 2, decides it's time for a change. Part of being a great competitor is being a great problem solver. Goes to 177 kilometres an hour on his second serve. That's right up there in terms of what we might ever see from a male player on their second serve. Only wins 40% of those points, but sticks at it. So he's up over 175 now, 177. 175 in set 3, 53%. That's a big bump from 38% in set 1. Set 4 sticks at it, 175 again, 67% of his second serve points won. And then, and this is the trickiness, right? It's an ever-evolving equation out there. Then Rublev starts to adjust his return position in the final set. He starts to figure it out. He starts to cotton on to the pattern, if you like. So in set 5, it's the same approach from the Brazilian at 177 kilometres an hour. But Rublev starts to shift things up. He's too canny for that. He's too clever. And that percentage takes a dive back down to 47%. So certainly, I think, an intriguing contest within a contest. Just looking at some of the data, particularly on the Brazilians' second serve speed and the approach that ensued thereafter coming out of this contest.
It's the old adage, isn't it? You're only as good as your second serve. And in the men's and women's game, really, that is true because players really should be winning about half of their second service points. But how often do we see them down in the 30s and the 40s? And we know with Andrey Rublev, that is one of his weaknesses, along with the net play, is his second serve just hasn't been good enough to take that final couple of steps at the majors and the bigger tournaments.
Yeah, so clearly a predetermined plan from the Brazilian in the event that things weren't going well, which they weren't through the first set or 2. But he was prepared to chance his arm and had the courage to do so. Some of those second serve speeds, you know, try averaging your second serve in the mid-170s. Easier said than done.
Wow.
That's really sending it down. But he knew that if you like the vanilla approach or the nuts and bolts wasn't going to get it done today. So he was prepared to have the courage to lay it down there and to take some risk in doing so, and very nearly pulled off an upset in so doing.
The former coach of Francis Tiafoe, Wayne Ferreira, who he's moved on from now, has stated the way to beat Andrey Rublev. And it's pretty clear, actually. You've got to stop him from hitting a lot of easy forehands. He usually camps in the backhand side so he can run around and hit forehands. So by the Brazilian actually going for his second serve, a little like Maxime Cressy does, go for 2 first serves, essentially, then you're stopping Rublev from getting onto the forehand and taking that big blow and then taking you off balance. So I think it was a masterstroke, and I'm sure that the opponents of Rublev in the future will be watching that match, and they would have taken note, if they're intelligent, if they've got someone like you by their side, which many of them do, don't they? They've got data analysis all over the place, and they'll be looking at that and saying, I'm going to do that as well against Andrey Rublev.
Yeah, and I think Candy makes an excellent point. It was an area that the Brazilian could look to exploit in terms of the relative strengths of the two players. And it's not necessarily been the forte of the Rublev service game in terms of the second serve speed. It's an area that he's been able to, he's been vulnerable at in recent times. So to have that type of disparity on second serve speed, these players were 20 kilometres apart in terms of the speeds they were delivering their second serves at over sets 2, 3, 4, and then 5. That gap started to shrink again. I think it explained to a large part what we saw play out there across the course of the match.
So they're the numbers, but from a spectator emotional point of view, it had all the bumps and all the roller coaster, dips and troughs as well, and some extraordinary rallies, particularly in set 4 from Seyboth Wild. He had 2 points, I think, in the third game of the fourth set that was simply out of this world. Like, they'll make the top 10 shots, I reckon, of the tournament.
You're already calling it, and he just stayed so calm and composed the whole way through. Has multiple wins over top 50 players. 3. He's also beaten Casper Ruud and Cristian Garin when he was in his prime. So really good wins, of course, as well as that one over Daniil Medvedev, which really threw Seyboth Wild into the headlines, didn't he, after he won at Roland Garros. But he was so cool. Then you've got the temper of Andrey Rublev. He said he's trying to cope with it, and he's brought in a psychologist to bring him down. But we know he's just a basket of emotions, isn't he, Andrey Rublev? And that makes him so fun to watch as well, because you're really living it every second he plays. He's so entertaining. So you've got sort of both of the personalities out there.
Absolutely, and the emotional roller coaster that you both described, that they certainly took us all on that across the course of the contest today, and now you just wonder from a couple of different angles. Rublev had to pay a real physical price to get through that contest. We saw a lot more energy burned or energy expended than we might have expected across the course of that match so far.
Absolutely.
I suppose the advantage he does have in his camp, though, looking ahead to round 2, he's got the extra day. So the Sunday start now, and the opponents, I think he plays the winner of the Eubanks Taro Daniil match. They don't compete until tomorrow. So he's got that 2-day recovery. So just another little nuance in the AO 2024 version that's coming straight to the fore and is whacking us straight between the eyes on day 1.
It was awesome. Okay, turning the spotlight towards day 2 and a women's first round match, a real tantalising one, because we see the 16th seed Caroline Garcia taking on a 2-time former champion Naomi Osaka.
What a match. I think out of all the women's matches, the first rounds, this is the one that just stood out and had lights all around it and beeping, because it's fascinating, isn't it? We've got Caroline Garcia, who we know is an excellent player, all out attacking, but really the highlight is on Naomi Osaka, twice champion here, a 4-time major champion, coming back from 15 months off. She now has a baby in tow, little Shy, her daughter, and she's only played one tournament before this where she won a round and then lost one, so we don't really know much about her form. We know that she's working with Wim Fissette, her former coach, who went away for a little bit and then has come back to her. But what do we expect from Naomi Osaka? That's the big question. She said she's not really putting any expectations on her. It's all about fun and enjoying herself, which clearly it wasn't at the end of Naomi Osaka Part 1 career. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Part 2 is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going into this contest, I wouldn't have anticipated that there's too many players on the WTA Tour that return in a more aggressive fashion than Naomi Osaka. But one of those players is Caroline Garcia. So having watched her firsthand last week in Adelaide play a handful of times, she's often close to halfway between the baseline and the service line at impact in terms of the second serve return position. And perhaps just a little shift to Naomi Osaka Mark II, if you like, in terms of what we saw from her in Brisbane. Not quite as aggressive on return position as what we may have seen first time around. So just a lens to keep an eye on as that really appetising and appealing contest plays out in front of us tomorrow night.
And it's going to be all about first serve percentage for both, because I've covered a lot of Caroline Garcia matches, and you're absolutely right. She is so attacking on the second serve, standing closer to the service line on many occasions than the baseline. She has a very short backswing and also looks to come in behind it. So if you're missing a lot of first serves and your second serve's not going deep, you're in major trouble against the Frenchwoman.
She said in her press conference yesterday, Naomi Osaka, that she's actually glad to have drawn a seed in her first round because hopefully if she comes through, it's going to make the second round matchup even easier, which is something you don't often hear players talk about, even venturing beyond the first round.
Well, I think it's the mindset of a champion, though, isn't it? It's knocked the seed off early. Thanks very much, and I'll grab that seed spot in the draw, and that'll give me a nice passage through to the second week. I certainly didn't think that way in my very mediocre playing career, but that's how the great players think. It's knock the best players off, back themselves in, no matter what, and I'll take every advantage of the opportunity that presents itself.
And Naomi Osaka is a winner, isn't she? I mean, she was literally born to be a winner in the mould of the Williams sisters. These two, her and her sister, were sort of baby tennis players from the word go. They were going to be professionals, and Naomi made it. And she is a champion. She's played 4 major finals. She's won all 4. That is an incredible record, including twice here. So I think even though she's giving us, well, this is a second career and I'm just trying to enjoy myself, she is a champion. And she also believes that she can beat Caroline Garcia, who is not in the best of frame right now.
All right, so I'll put it to you, our 2 experts, a winner and a scoreline, if you will, sets.
Well, I think I saw just enough from Garcia last week in Adelaide. I think there's a bit going on there on the Garcia service game. She was having some real problems navigating her service games last week in Adelaide. Some real ball toss variability, quite vulnerable on her service game. So albeit it's early days in the Osaka comeback, I think I'm going to have to plump for the 2-time champion here. So I'm with Osaka in a tight two-set, straight-set victory.
Well, I was going to go with Osaka, but just for differences, I'm going to go with Caroline Garcia, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I'm going to go with a 7-6, 7-5 to the seeded player.
Covering all bases. I like it, Candy. Simon, Candy, thank you for joining us on the AO Show Spotlight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, John.